everyone. I hope you're having a good day. You're listening to TechFest Talks into Space Energy Edition, a podcast by students for the students. My name's Connor Gardner. I'm a fifth year student at Aberdeen Grammar School. I enjoy studying science and engineering in school, and today I'm excited to interview Ryan Menzies from Apollo Engineering. Ryan, do you want to give a little introduction?
Hi everyone, my name is Ryan Menzies, or Mingus is actually the pronunciation that I go with, which is the traditional way. But that's fine. It's a constant battle I've got, Connor, with educating people in how to pronounce Mingus. But up in the northeast, it's very much a Menzies country, I think. But my name is Ryan Mingus, and I'm the managing director of Apollo. We're an engineering and advisory business centered in and around the energy space.
So, first question, just get straight into it. So what does your average working day look like at Apollo? What kind of stuff are you doing?
Um, that's what should be a simple question is actually probably not a simple question because it's highly varied. I find sometimes you get to the end of the day and you look back and think, wow, I had certain plans to do things, and it's you get sidelined with lots of things that come along from left field. So varied is a simple answer, but that is a little bit vague. As a managing director in a business, then the role is naturally varied, and it does cover all of the bases within the business. I've got responsibility for everything, which can be quite daunting, but obviously you build a business, you build a good management team around you that have got responsibilities. You split up the certain areas in the business, get people responsible for those areas, and then that's how you grow a business. Right now, a lot of my time is devoted to a brand update project. Brand is everything, and what your company stands for. It's so important you can get that right. There's lots of big examples where you can get that very wrong as well. So we're in the midst of a brand update project. You need to periodically visit your brand. It's not relevant forever when you set out, and it's now a time where there's lots of shifting sands in the energy space just now. So we felt that as our company's evolved, our brand and how we present ourselves needs to be brought up to date to be more relevant to what we're doing now and in the future. It was a little bit more retrospective about what we've been doing in the past. So we're right in the middle of that. It's a great project to be involved in, and it's really important that we get the project right so that we are fit for the future. But winding the clock back, if I could, then my roles evolved as the business has grown. I was involved in setting up Apollo 12 years ago now. And in my early days, I was very much focused on engineering and doing engineering, as that's what I was or I am. When you're a very small micro business, as we were 12 years ago, it's very much all hands to the pump. So I was chief cook and bottle washer as well. But these days, many elements are still the same. Speaking with people is what I spend a lot of my time doing. I spend as much time speaking with people internally as externally. I try and have the bias to internally, actually. We've got over 100 guys and girls in the business now, and so some of that time is spent trying to remember everyone's names. But more seriously, it's ensuring that people understand what our business is and what it stands for, and that are pulling in the right directions. The vision and the mission that I set out, the people get behind that and pull in the same common direction. So yeah, that's a large part of what I spend my day doing is communication with people.
So you mentioned you're trying to sort of move your brand a bit at Apollo. Does that involve any movement over to more sustainable energy focus? Is that sort of the direction that you're moving at the moment?
Yeah, very much so, Connor. I think that one of the challenges with our brand just now is that historically, probably 70% of our work has been in the oil and gas sector. So therefore, your brand and your identity tends to get a little bit dominated by that. In actual fact, and since the very start of Apollo, actually my role from an engineering perspective coming into the business, I was involved in offshore wind from day one in Apollo. So one of our second project ever to land, and day two of Apollo being formed was actually in offshore wind. So we have got a good heritage in sustainable energy, but our brand and what that stands for has a little bit of catching up to do. So yeah, that's very much the focus is in around that area.
So obviously changing into sustainable energy will have a few challenges that comes along with it. I was just wondering if you had any challenges that you're facing at the moment in your renewable energy that would be that would be transferable to someone who's working in the space industry as well. Is there anything that's similar between those two?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. That there are lots of common challenges, I mean, my business is called Apollo Offshore Engineering. It's currently its Sunday name, but as part of the branding exercise, we're actually going to drop the offshore engineering because right now, actually, a slight majority of our work is actually onshore, not offshore, as well as a lot of our work now being not in oil and gas, but in areas such as hydrogen, offshore and onshore wind, and such like. But our business is called Apollo because partly anyway because of my love of aviation and aerospace more generally. It's something that I pay a lot of attention to and I'm really passionate about. And so that's why the name Apollo exists. Though I've never worked in the space industry as such, I have studied aerospace engineering as a student. That's what I went on to do after school. And space and flying more generally, as I said, is something that was deeply interesting to me and still is to this day. And I knew that getting a technical footing in that area would open the doors to other opportunities. And 20 years later, along's come Apollo. But I think that in my time in the business, I've been to many industry events where there's been parallels between the offshore environment and the space environment. That's been one particular area where there's been commonality that's clear. Um, I think this is particularly the case in the subsea sector, where there's robotics and remote technology, for example, that have very strong similarities and use some of the same technology that's deployed in space. Indeed, there's learnings gained from subsea and offshore that have been applied to space and vice versa. So I think that's quite interesting in and around that area. Also, in part of the work that we do, a big part of the work that we do is designing stuff. If that's an offshore wind turbine or if it's some sort of a subsea structure, whatever it might be. But weight is a big factor in design. And weight is a big factor in space as well. I know that from a cargo loading and all the rest of it. The lighter and smaller you can make things, then the easier it is to get them to where you want that to be that into orbit around Earth to provide telecommunications or what it might be, or be it to subsea to anchor an offshore wind turbine or something, floating wind turbine or something like that. So there's lots of commonalities in some of the design challenges that we face, as well as innovation more generally. I think that one of the things that really attracted me to the energy sector was the pace of change. While I was studying aerospace engineering at university, some of my colleagues went on to work in the aerospace sector for Airbus and companies like that. Really interesting jobs, but they weren't for me just because you're working on a big project for many, many years, maybe on a very small piece of that, and it takes a long time for you to realize that. Now, some people get a kick from that. I'm a little bit more need a more instant sort of buzz, and the offshore environment and the oil and gas sector, I think, was one where you work out things, you work out problems quickly, and you work out interesting problems, and you have to work them out quickly. And I think that's also the case in space. There's many well documented sort of instances, for example, of the Apollo space missions where they've tried to work out real life and death sort of situations and how they're going to get themselves out of that. I remember one of the Apollo missions where on Earth they were using bits of washing machine to try and simulate what the guys could do in space to try and fix their air conditioning system. I think, which was not just so they get a pleasant temperature in their module, but it's actually so that they could live. So it doesn't get any more dramatic than that. Well, some of the emergency scopes that we get involved in the energy sector are maybe a little bit different. They're nonetheless carry the same urgency and risk and that pace of having to do something quickly. So I think there's many commonalities between the industries, and that's just a couple of sort of examples that spring to mind.
Mm-hmm. Well, so you're talking about the sort of the speed and the urgency you have to work at. Just thinking along the lines of some of the skills that are involved in that. As you mentioned, you did aerospace engineering, and I was wondering if the skills you've learnt in the classroom, in school, and at university, working on these projects, have you learnt skills along the way that have that have developed you further, sort of like communication, leaderships, and sort of skills like that have helped you?
Yeah, so there's lots of different ways. I think that when I was at school, there was a little bit of a disconnect for me mentally in how some of the academic subjects related to the real world. I couldn't see the connection quite clearly. Um, and I guess part of that problem was not having the industry experience. But when I went to university, I wanted to, I did enjoy engineering and the technical elements. I liked maths to an extent. I wasn't actually great at maths, but I enjoyed maths. I only did very average at school, and it wasn't until university that I actually started doing quite well academically, I would say. And it's because I started to see that connection between maths and how you can apply that to the real world from a design point of view. So that really helped me a lot to develop. And then once I got into the real world, you actually realize that, right, that all this stuff that I've learned, you actually do really need that in some jobs. So that was quite interesting. But I think for me, that was a key thing. But another key thing was some of the softer skills that you alluded to there as well, that they should absolutely not be forgotten about. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I'm as a character, I'm probably a little bit more on the introvert than extrovert side, although I can push myself out there as an MD. I've got to be, but certainly at university, one of the key things that helped me in my career was helping to develop those social skills, to network with like-minded people. These, as I said, were maybe not the strongest of skills, but it really helped me in these interactions and in my studies as well. I actually think that I learned as much from my classmates and just chatting to people as I did from lecturers in hindsight. So the benefits of networking is a key thing, and that's really stuck with me and something that I apply all the time, and something that, once you get into the real world, it's engaging with people. You're not expected to know everything or understand everything. If you're speaking with a client, you won't know their business as well as they do, but you get ways to ask open questions, and you start to learn a lot more about what their pain is, and then you can start to think about how you can apply solutions to that and find work opportunities. So yeah, there's lots of things, lots of different skills, just the soft skills as well as the real academic subjects that in hindsight, thinking about it, learned at university, that you absolutely do then apply through your career.
Just backtracking a bit, as you mentioned earlier, Apollo is currently having a bit of a rebrand. Do you think into more sustainable energy? Do you think other companies should be following sort of your lead? Maybe not your lead, but should they be following sort of the general trend? And do you think there should be a priority for other companies to move to more sustainable sources?
Yeah, absolutely. We're an engineering business in the energy sector, so we design things, create technology, and support our clients to realize their ideas. Um, all businesses that we're working with, be them traditional oil and gas clients or more sustainable businesses in the industry, for example, um, every business is looking to be more sustainable and has got obligations to help support getting to net zero. So if you're an engineering business in the energy space, I don't think there's many energy businesses like ours that aren't also now thinking about focusing beyond oil and gas. It's almost impossible not to anyway, because even with a few exceptions of some of the smaller operators, from an oil and gas perspective, most of the oil and gas companies, and BP and Total spring to mind just now, they're very much focused on offshore wind and alternate energies as well, and reinvesting a lot of their profits into that. But the role of smaller companies like Apollo, then, as I say, we're very much evolving our businesses, the skills and techniques that you need to design floating offshore system, for example, is not that dissimilar to designing an offshore structure for the oil and gas industry. The fundamentals are the same at the end of the day. Steel is steel. There's hydrodynamics involved. The water doesn't matter what's in it, whether it's a floating wave energy device or if it's an FPSO for oil and gas. The loads and all the rest of it that happen are the same. So the engineering fundamentals are the same and are highly transferable. So I think businesses like us are transitioning and very much part of this energy transition. And I think more generally speaking, I think how we operate as well is something that has changed, that's maybe more recent. So we're thinking about our carbon footprint, the impact that how we design something, the impact that might have on the environment if we were to design it slightly differently? Can we be more efficient in our design that reduces the amount of welding, for example, that's going to have an impact in the car on the environment, or reduce the weight? That's going to be a good thing from an environmental perspective. Um, but also, even softer than that, is actually, where are our offices? How do our engineers and people that work for my business, how do they get into the office? Can we have the office located so they can use public transport, or even walk, or get a bicycle? We've got things like cycle to work schemes, and an initiative where staff can get access to electric cars and stuff like that. So these are things that will help the reduce emissions. But directly, the engineering that we are doing we're very privileged in that we can actually have a real impact in how we design things, and how we support our clients are going to have a real benefit for the energy mix moving forward.
Well, it's good to hear Apollo have these initiatives in place, and I was just wondering, is there any specific set goals that you want to reach by a certain time, or is it just continued reducing of emissions and things like that?
We're obviously supporting the net zero strategy to be as green as we can be, and to reduce our emissions to net zero as soon as we possibly can. I think in our business, that's something that we are targeting before the end of this decade, by 2030, to try and get there. Um, the so that's a key goal. But I think beyond there, it goes on as well. It can't just stop. You've got to continually be working on things. There's lots of, going back to the engineering side of things, and lots of things that we're working on just now are really interesting. They're definitely going to be better and greener for the planet, but there's such a competition going on for emerging technologies, that I think there's a little bit of a fallout to happen over the coming years. It'll be quite interesting over the next few years to see what happens, and those shifting sands that I refer to, and we all know that we need to reduce our reliance on oil and gas, and that's really happening now. But we also know that we can't just simply turn off these taps, whether we like it or not. We are reliant on oil and gas to support the renewable industry, actually, to an extent. But it has to be a transition, and it has to be managed. There's things like last year, for example, we had to fire up a coal power station, because we need our energy demands are such that they're instant. We suddenly need energy, and if the wind's not blowing, then there's a big problem. Indeed, if the wind is actually blowing too much, there's also a problem, because we're creating too much capacity, and there's going to be even more capacity coming on, and we haven't got the means to store or distribute that. So there's areas in and around that will evolve as well.
Thank you. That's been really interesting, actually. And I was just one final question, just before we finish off. I was wondering if there's one piece of advice that you could give to a student or someone who wants to get into this industry, what would it be?
Ooh. First and foremost, if you're interested in the engineering sector generally, then from an academic point of view, going on to college or university to study, I would say, is a safe bet if you're looking for a job at the end of it all, because engineers, and there's a big skill shortage, and engineers are really in demand now. And in 4, 5, 6 years' time, where people like yourself are graduating, you're really going to be in demand, and the world will be your oyster. And not necessarily just to go into to an engineering job. It does not mean you need to become an engineer. At the end of my course, and I studied aerospace engineering, as I said, down in Glasgow, and went on to do a PhD following that, just because I was enjoying the academic lifestyle a bit too much, perhaps. But at the end of my course, probably 2/3 of the class went on to do other things, and by that I mean things outside of engineering. Um, an engineering degree is really useful for all sorts of careers, particularly if maths is relevant. A number of my class ended up in finance, in and around that, and roles down in London or in Glasgow, actuary and stuff like that, and maybe chasing the big dollars. A few of my colleagues like me got into engineering, but not just necessarily the oil and gas sector or the aerospace sector where I studied, but there's a couple of colleagues of mine that went into the F1 industry. One person is very senior in Police Scotland, actually, and only a small handful actually went on to practice engineering in the aerospace industry, as far as I'm aware. But there's a couple of my friends, in fact, that are up here in Aberdeen that are involved in the engineering sector. So I think engineering can be really satisfying, and it can. There's lots of flavors of engineering, and it can lead to lots of opportunities. But if you're going to understand, if you're going to study engineering, what I would say is it's not easy. It's a challenging degree, and your heart really needs to be in it. You need to have a fundamental interest and an ability there. But as I say, not. I mean, I wasn't the best academically. I scraped through school and then started to excel, if that's the right word. Once I got to university, I sort of found right. This is what I hoped it was, and it's really interesting. But I knew a lot of those skills would be transferable. But how do you know when you're studying that at the end of this, what you want to go into? And I think that work experience is a key thing. And if you can get work experience at school as well, then that would help you just to make sure that you're doing the right thing by going on to study engineering or technical subjects at university. But also once you're at university, it's not easy to get work experience, but it's a little bit easier once you're in university. And I think that that's a key thing. Just sort of dipping your toe in the water and just seeing what it's all about. So my advice, I guess, would just be just to go for it. Is to try and get some work experience in and to network yourself as well. I think to go and speak to people, I think that's a key skill that I maybe wasn't very good at in my early career or going back to university or school. I probably didn't speak to enough people and be inquisitive and ask questions. And it wasn't till till just now really that I realised that people like to talk about things that they're passionate about and that the person asking the questions is passionate about. So go and meet people, talk to people, and ask them about their experiences and what they enjoyed and don't enjoy, and then try and relate that to yourself, and that will help you to make the right decisions, hopefully.
Well, just one final thing I wanted to say along the lines of work experience. It's something I've just recently got into as well over the summer. I'll be at a local Aberdeen company, and I think it'll be really interesting to see what I've learned in my engineering and math subjects at school, how they're going to translate into the real industry. But thank you for that, Ryan. That was a great chat. And thanks to everyone for listening. You can tune in for more episodes from TechFest Talks, and goodbye for now.